Donovan, I'm typing this out in the middle of the night because I just can't shake what's been happening along the border down here in the Tucson sector. And I figured you might want to put this on your YouTube channel if you think folks would be interested. I've been with the U.S. Border Patrol for more years than I care to count, and I've seen some strange stuff. But lately, things have gone from, "that's odd," to, "I'm not even sure I can trust my own eyes." Still, I feel like I need to document it, get it off my chest, and let someone outside the agency know what's been transpiring. I've been stationed near the Sasabe, Arizona crossing for a while now. Lots of desert, rolling hills, and a harsh environment that usually does a good job deterring most folks. Under normal conditions, you deal with your standard mix of narcotics smuggling, folks seeking a better life, maybe a few coyote-run groups trying to sneak over during the night. It used to be that we'd come across footprints, empty water jugs, maybe the occasional piece of clothing snagged on the barbed wire. Then you'd follow the trail and either apprehend the group or they'd slip away into the brush. But times have changed. With the prior Trump administration's emphasis on border enforcement, we got new gear, more manpower, bigger budgets, and we got new segments of what people call the wall. It's not the old fence I remember when I first started. These are taller steel bollards, rebar laced, nearly 30 feet in some areas with anti-climb plates near the top. It's designed so your average person can't easily scale it. And it's definitely not something you can just toss a ladder onto and hoist yourself over, at least not in most places. I mean, I've been personally present when people have tried and ended up breaking limbs dropping from the top. It's no joke. But in the last year, we started getting reports of intruders that didn't fit the usual profile. You might scoff at that phrase, but that's exactly what we call them. Intruders, or UDA, undocumented alien, if you're going by standard Border Patrol lingo. But these intruders, I'm not sure they're humans in the typical sense. And before you assume I've lost it, understand I'm not the only one out here who's seen them. The reason I'm up half the night writing this is because I just got back from a shift that was almost too bizarre to put into words, but I'm going to try. I can't guarantee a nice, linear account, because my mind's all over the place. But here goes. It started maybe 6 months ago, around midsummer of last year, when we got one of those calls that always sets your adrenaline spiking. One of the remote sensors triggered near Organ Pipe Cactus National Monument, and that patch of desert is tricky. It's wide open in some places, but the terrain can be rocky with a lot of cactus, and the summer heat is brutal. Typically, we'd race out, expecting to maybe find a group that had tripped the sensor. Instead, we show up to find these bizarre footprints in the sandy wash. They were elongated, almost like a foot that was too narrow and had an odd curvature. And the spacing between prints suggested something with a stride longer than any normal human. We do get folks who are extremely tall, but this was different. Each step was maybe 5 or 6 feet from the other, and there were no drag marks, no scuffs, none of the usual signs that come with crossing. Just these crisp, spaced-out prints going straight to the fence. And at the base of the fence, the footprints just stopped. Now, I'm used to seeing scuff marks where people climb, especially if they're wearing standard shoes or boots. You'll find friction marks on the steel, maybe some cloth or rubber embedded if they're wearing cheap footwear. But this time, we found no sign of climbing gear, no smudges, nothing. It was like whoever, or whatever it was, just leapt over in one go. My partner that night joked maybe it was a kangaroo, which of course makes no sense, but it was about the only rational comparison. We reported what we found, filed it away, and the official line was that it was probably an anomaly, a smuggler with some specialized contraption, or a coyote with a ladder that he took back over with him. But none of that matched what we saw. Also, we never found corresponding footprints on the other side of the fence where they would have landed, just vanished. I tried not to dwell on it too much. You see so many weird things out here. But then it started happening more often. The same type of footprints, sometimes near Lukeville, sometimes further east near Nogales. No sign of forced entry, or I guess forced climb, just tracks that would appear and vanish around the border barrier. And if it was one of those nights with a bright moon, You sometimes felt like someone was watching you from the other side, or even from up in the hills. I can't tell you how many times I'd do a 360, shining my flashlight around, convinced I'd heard something, or that I'd caught a silhouette of something on a ridgeline. But I'd see nothing but the outlines of cacti and the desert brush. One night, I remember it was close to 2 a.m. We were on the lookout near the San Miguel Gate area. The sensor had gone off again, and we were watching from our unit, engine and lights off, to maintain the element of surprise. Over the radio, one of our guys said in a hushed tone that he could see movement on thermal. So I flicked on our vehicle's FLIR screen, the forward-looking infrared, to see if I could spot what he was talking about. Sure enough, there was a heat signature, a big one, pacing along the fence line. My first thought was, it had to be more than one person, maybe a group huddled together. But as I watched, it appeared to be a single figure, or shape, with this weird stooped posture. We're all used to seeing normal body shapes through thermal. You see the head, shoulders, arms, torso, legs. This was different. Tall, but the head and upper body were hunched forward, elongated, almost serpentine in a way. It moved in a fluid manner that didn't look anything like a person trying to be stealthy or run. It just glided along, occasionally dropping to all fours, but then standing back up again. I called it in on the radio, and while we debated whether to approach or keep watching, the thing effortlessly scaled the fence in the thermal display. When I say effortlessly, I'm not exaggerating. It kind of compressed itself, bunched up, and then soared over the top without even pausing. You'd expect some flailing or a moment of balancing, but there was none of that. It vanished from the screen, and the next second, we lost the heat signature entirely. We ran over to the fence line and found the exact same elongated footprints. One of the younger guys, who's from a ranching family, said it reminded him of how a mountain lion leaves tracks, except for the fact these had a distinct heel and shape resembling a foot. The entire vibe was something I'd call wrong, if that makes sense. An intangible sense that we weren't dealing with a normal crossing. We filed that report, and the official story was that it might have been a person using advanced climbing gear or something else. But among ourselves, we started talking about legends, especially those from around these parts. Some guys mentioned skinwalkers, others said shapeshifters, some said the chupacabra. We have a lot of southwestern folklore. I'm not one to jump to the supernatural, but the more of these nighttime sightings I saw or heard about from my partners, the less I could brush it off as just a fluke. Around that same time, we started noticing strange lights in the sky as well. That might sound completely unrelated, but down here, UFO sightings are not uncommon. You talk to enough ranchers, you'll hear about lights that dance around in the desert, sometimes near the ground, sometimes high up in the sky. I thought I had seen it all, but one night, I was parked near a remote road, scanning the horizon, and in the distance, I caught a flash of greenish light that zipped by horizontally and then shot straight up. I radioed in, but no one else had eyes on it. Then, about a minute later, a second, smaller orb-like light seemed to appear from nowhere, flutter around near the top of the fence and vanish. Honestly, I've never seen anything quite like it. They looked almost like glowing tennis balls bouncing around in the darkness, if you can picture that. Again, no explanation. That same shift, we found more of those elongated tracks. As you know, with the push to build more walls under President Trump's administration, everything got heavily politicized, so it was, and still is, a tense environment. We're under pressure to produce results, catch people, reduce crossings. There's drones overhead, new sensor arrays, better night vision, the works. But despite all that fancy tech, these creatures, or whatever they are, never register the way normal people do. We rarely catch them on camera, and when we do, it's inconclusive. The images come out distorted, or the figure moves so fast you only get a blur. And for all the times we get them on thermal, we can't seem to get close enough to intercept. They either vanish into the desert or scale the fence before we can arrive. I remember a conversation with one of our older guys who's nearing retirement. He said that back in the 90s, before all this advanced enforcement, there were rumors of certain spots along the border known for weird sightings. He claimed that near Yuma, guys used to swear they saw tall, hairless beings that could run 60 or 70 miles per hour across the desert, outrunning any vehicle or helicopter. Everyone dismissed it as tall tales or confusion with drug mules using advanced smuggling techniques. But now he sees the same details cropping up in our new reports. It's as if whatever that phenomenon was, it's ramping up again. We have no official briefing on it. It's all hush-hush. But talk to the right colleagues over a few beers, and the stories come spilling out. In early December, there was an incident that rattled me. We got a tip about a group crossing near the Babokavari Peak area, which is notoriously rugged. A group of us agents responded, thinking we might be dealing with a big load of narcotics or a coyote operation. We split up, scanning with night vision goggles and flashlights. I was with 2 other guys. We found what looked like a makeshift campsite. Still smoldering embers, scattered blankets, water jugs, but no people. The weird thing was, the perimeter of this campsite had footprints, those same elongated prints, but there were multiple sets this time, like 3 or 4 different individuals, all with that same bizarre shape. The spacing of each footstep told us they stood at least 7 feet tall, maybe more. One of the guys pointed out that some of the footprints looked like they overlapped in odd ways, almost like they were pacing in circles around the campsite. It was an unsettling sight, I'll tell you that. We called for backup, and by the time the other agents arrived, half the footprints seemed to have been wiped away by some method. The wind wasn't blowing nearly enough to cover them with sand that quickly. It was as if something or someone deliberately erased them. Now, I'm not going to name names, but a couple of the guys, including myself, started speculating about government or military involvement. You know how rumors spread. We wondered if maybe these were some sort of experimental troops or test subjects. Sounds insane, I know, but sometimes you hear about black projects, human-animal hybrids, or genetically modified soldiers. It's the stuff of tabloids, but when you see these prints vanish or see the fence scaled in seconds, you start questioning the boundaries of what's possible. And if these creatures are crossing back and forth, it's almost as if they're testing the border. We don't see any contraband left behind, no sign of a typical smuggling route. They appear, then disappear. I used to be big into Southwestern legends and read about the Tohono O'odham people's stories. They talk about spirits in the desert, shape changers and watchers. I never gave it much thought beyond local lore, but some of it resonates with what we're encountering. My buddy who's half Navajo even mentioned the possibility of skinwalkers. Those are witches that can transform into animals or other shapes. Typically, it's linked with more malevolent entities, able to run on all 4s at insane speeds, or even slip through cracks in rock walls. It was always more of a horror story to me, something you'd talk about around a campfire. But in the last few months, I've been less skeptical. I don't know if that's what we're dealing with, but it sure ain't normal folks wandering across. Remember that period in 2018 when the news kept talking about migrant caravans and how the administration was cracking down, sending the National Guard to help us out? Well, ironically, that's around the time some of the weirdness really picked up. It's almost like the more we militarized the border, the more these sightings occurred. One explanation a buddy suggested is that the underground smuggling community might have turned to new tactics, including high-tech suits or exoskeletons, or even paying off folks with advanced climbing capabilities. But that does not explain the footprint's shape, the bizarre behavior, the times we've tried to chase them and they vanish into thin air. We do have dogs too. We track with K9 units. On multiple occasions, the dogs refuse to follow certain trails. They'd whimper, get anxious, try to back away. That's not normal, especially for a well-trained Belgian Malinois or German Shepherd that's used to chasing down criminals in the dead of night. Something about these trails freaked them out. Anyway, fast forward to last week. We had a relatively quiet shift. I was patrolling near the 3 Points area. The radio was silent, so I stepped out to stretch my legs. The desert was eerily calm. No wind, no rustling from rodents or anything. That's when I noticed, under the faint moonlight, a silhouette standing maybe 200 yards from me on the other side of the highway. At first, I thought it was a saguaro cactus trunk. You know how they can appear like a person in low light. But then it moved. It took a step or two toward me, paused, and seemed to tilt its head like it was studying me. The shape was tall, gaunt, with limbs that looked too elongated. I slowly reached for my flashlight, trying not to spook it. I flicked it on, and in that split second of illumination, I swear I saw reflective eyes, like an animal's eye shine, except set forward in the face like a human. Then, quick as you like, it darted away at a speed I've never seen a person replicate. It crossed that open ground, scaled a barbed wire fence, and disappeared into the desert before my flashlight beam could follow. I stood there, heart hammering, realizing that was definitely one of the creatures. I checked for footprints, and yes, I found 2 of those elongated tracks in the dirt. Called in the sighting, but by the time a partner arrived, there was no trace left. Then last night's shift was the kicker. Why I'm writing this right now. We got a call around midnight about movement near the border fence just west of Nogales. Another sensor went off, and we assumed it was your standard crossing. We mobilized 4 units, each approaching from different angles, trying to box them in. As we converged, I caught a glimpse of at least 2 figures on my night vision. They were hunched, tall, and moving with a weird gait that alternated between upright and all fours. One agent approached with caution, announcing themselves in Spanish, the usual routine. No response. Then we heard this guttural hiss. Not a growl, not a language, but like a hiss you'd hear from a big lizard or snake. The agent freaked out and shouted for them to stop, to show their hands. The figures turned and scaled the fence. One hopped up so fast it was like it had springs for legs, and the other moved horizontally along the fence at an impossible angle, then propelled itself up and over. No gear, no climbing hooks, nothing. One of our guys fired a less lethal round, a pepper ball, out of pure panic, but the creatures were gone in an instant. We approached the spot where they'd been. The ground there is pretty hard packed, so footprints weren't as defined. Still, we found a partial print with that elongated shape. The entire team was rattled. Over the radio, someone said, "They're not human," which sparked a mini panic, as we all realized we had no idea what we just encountered. We stuck around, did a grid search for about an hour, found nothing except some weird scratch marks on the steel fence. We've tested that fence with standard climbing attempts, and typically you see scuffs from boots or gloves. These marks looked more like claw indentations. Everyone was quiet on the drive back. No one quite knows how to handle a situation like that. That's the story so far, though story might be the wrong word because it's ongoing. And the more it happens, the less I feel in control. We've tried sending the relevant details up the chain of command, but we get the same old, just keep patrolling, keep documenting. They're not giving us any official guidance on how to deal with these sightings. Some folks suspect there might be hush-hush directives from higher up. Maybe we're told to keep it under wraps so it doesn't cause a public stir. After all, the border is a hot-button issue, and can you imagine the reaction if the public found out about, well, entities that don't seem to be normal humans crossing back and forth at will? There's a rumor that in the El Paso sector, a few agents had a face-to-face encounter with something reptilian. That's the word they used, reptilian. They said it had a scaled appearance, big black eyes, and it was clinging to the wall about 15 feet up when they spotted it with a spotlight. By the time they scrambled out of their vehicles, it was at the top and gone. I didn't witness that personally, but I trust the agent who told me. He's not the type to spin tall tales. And apparently, when they reported it, they got a real stern talk from higher-ups, basically telling them to keep quiet. One guy let it slip that ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, might have special instructions about these sightings, but is reluctant to share. Another mentioned that the military presence in certain border zones isn't just about supporting the border mission. It's about monitoring these anomalies. Again, that's all secondhand, so I can't confirm. Sometimes when I'm driving alone at night along the remote roads between these little border towns, I let my imagination get the better of me, and I think about all the UFO talk. the stories about reptilians living in subterranean bases, or the accounts of Bigfoot-like creatures migrating through desert washes. I used to dismiss that as pure speculation, but now, every time I hear a weird noise or see something flicker across my peripheral vision, I question everything. On the nights I do see something, it's so fleeting that I can't get solid proof. It's mentally exhausting, like being stuck in the twilight zone. You wonder how many other people have had similar experiences and just kept quiet so they don't sound nuts. I talked to a local rancher near Aravaca who claims that for decades he's had nighttime visitors that he calls the Watchers. He said they're tall, lean figures that slip across his property without disturbing the livestock. Sometimes, though, the cattle would get spooked and wouldn't produce milk for a day or two. He claims to have found half-eaten coyotes on his land, as if something was hunting them. The rancher says he doesn't bother reporting it to us because he doesn't think we'll believe him, but he swears these Watchers are not normal humans, and he claims to have seen them leap over a 10-foot fence with minimal effort. This is the same region we're seeing the elongated footprints in. Coincidence? I'm starting to doubt it. So, all of this begs the question, are these sightings new, or have they been going on forever, and we're just now noticing because security is so tight? Maybe these entities have always roamed the desert under the cover of darkness, and it's only with the new sensors, drones, and the bigger presence of border agents that we're catching glimpses of them. I don't have the answer. We share these stories quietly among ourselves, but no one's stepping forward publicly because the chain of command is very strict about no speculation in official reports. If we do mention something out of the ordinary, we get told to revise or omit certain details. I recall a conversation with an agent who transferred from the Laredo sector. He said back in 2019, a small group of agents encountered a massive winged creature near the Rio Grande. He described it as a Mothman-like figure, with a wingspan nearly 15 feet across, perched on the top of a tree near the riverbank. They tried shining lights on it, but it flew off, disappearing into the darkness. The official explanation was a big vulture, or a large hawk that was misidentified, but those guys swore it looked humanoid and had glowing red eyes. They were so spooked they refused to patrol that area alone for a while. Stories like that don't usually make it outside of our immediate circles, but I believe there's a pattern forming across the entire southern border. Another weird phenomenon, missing time. I personally have not experienced it, but two agents I trust told me about an incident near the Tohono-O'odham reservation line. They were in their vehicle, scanning for movement, and the next thing they knew, 2 hours had passed. Neither of them recalled falling asleep or blacking out, but their dash cam showed them sitting motionless for that entire time. The only weird detail on the footage was a bright flash of light that occurred about half an hour into this missing time. The official stance was, they must have dozed off from exhaustion, but they swear up and down that's not what happened. And on top of everything else, we sometimes get that sense of being watched from above, like there's a presence that's aware of our movements. Could be paranoia, sure, but so many of us share the same feeling. The desert nights can be eerie, no doubt, but this is different. It's beyond the typical desert spookiness. I wonder if there's some kind of government or military cover-up. We get these borderline encounters, we gather data, and it disappears up the chain. Maybe the higher-ups are logging it, analyzing it, but sure aren't telling us anything. We're just the boots on the ground, told to keep searching for normal crossers and contraband, while ignoring the truly unexplainable. It's frustrating because you're left to rationalize bizarre experiences on your own, which eventually wears you down. I'm telling you all this, Donovan, because I know you keep an open mind. Personally, I don't care if I get ridiculed. Something is happening out here, and it needs more attention. I can't keep quiet, especially when younger agents are getting spooked. Or worse, they're seeing these things and thinking they're going crazy. They're not crazy. It's real, and it's not isolated to one stretch of border. I've heard similar stories from agents near the Big Bend sector, from folks in the El Centro sector, and even some near Brownsville. The details might vary: a weird shape, strange footprints, silhouettes scaling the fence, but the gist is the same. I don't think these entities are crossing for the same reasons normal migrants do. They don't seem to carry supplies. They're not smuggling. They show up. They vanish. Sometimes they're seen alone. Other times in small groups. Could be something interdimensional, as wild as that sounds. Could be some advanced species using the remote desert as a testing ground. Could be military black ops. I've asked myself 100 times, why the border specifically? Maybe they're studying our response times. Or maybe the border barrier is like a challenge or a boundary line they want to cross, for reasons we can't fathom. Or maybe it has nothing to do with politics or immigration. Maybe it's just a geographic location that suits them. We have enough anecdotal evidence to fill a book. Sightings in the desert, glowing lights, creatures with unnatural climbing abilities, footprints that defy logic. But we don't have definitive proof. No clear photos, no confirmed videos. I've tried capturing cell phone footage, but it's always too dark, too far away, or the creatures move too fast. The only semi-decent footage we got was from a handheld thermal scope, but it's so grainy that it's inconclusive. People would say it's a trick of the light or a glitch. Let me wrap up, though wrap up is a misnomer because this is far from over. The official stance is nothing to see here. The unofficial stance from us guys on the ground is something big is going on and we're being kept in the dark. We just keep quiet, keep patrolling. I don't know what to expect in the coming months. A part of me worries we might have a more dramatic confrontation soon. What if these entities start getting aggressive? Or what if they already are, and we just haven't seen the worst of it? Some nights I half expect to find one of my fellow agents gone missing. The only reason that might not be happening is because the creatures don't want to be revealed. I get goosebumps thinking about it. Anyway, Donovan, that's my long-winded account of what's been going on. Feel free to share it on your channel in whatever format you choose. People might dismiss it, but at least the story is out there. If you get other folks who have seen similar things, let me know. I'd like to compare notes, see if there's a pattern across different regions. Because right now, all I have are pieces of a puzzle, and I'm sure there are more pieces out there.